Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
We begin in Detroit with the latest on a possible auto workers strike. Even a brief work stoppage could cost the U.S. economy billions. Bloomberg's Ed Corey has the latest on the negotiations from Detroit.
The UAW is asking for a 40% raise for its members. Sources tell Bloomberg it's lowered that demand slightly, asking for a series of increases over nearly 5 years that would start with an 18% boost, then alternating between 5 and 4%. But automakers say that would boost labor costs so high it would threaten their viability. General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis are facing a contract deadline just before midnight Thursday for nearly 150,000 U.S. hourly workers. In Detroit, Ed Corey, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, Ed, thank you. And if no deal is reached by this Thursday, it could cut U.S. GDP by $5.6 billion and push the Michigan economy into a recession. That's according to Anderson Economic Group.
Meanwhile, in Silicon Valley this morning, Nathan, Apple will unveil its new iPhone 15 Pro today, and it comes at a critical time for the tech giant as it aims to pull out of a smartphone sales slump. Bloomberg chief tech correspondent Mark Gurman tells us what else we could expect today.
You'll see 4 new iPhone 15 models, 2 low-end, 2 high-end, both in the same 6.1-inch and 6.7-inch screen sizes. You'll see a new titanium design for the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max. You'll see on those higher-end phones a better battery life, a lighter frame, and the A17 chip built on the new 3-nanometer production process, so a little leg up on what China's got in their new Huawei devices. The Apple Watch upgrades will be very minor, and then on the AirPods, you'll see a move to USB-C, that new charging standard, which is also going to be present on all 4 new iPhone models.
And that's Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who says Apple's also contending with rising pressure in China due to a government worker iPhone ban.
And we have more news out of Apple ahead of the product launch, Karen. Bloomberg News is learning for the first time the iPhone maker plans to make an India-built iPhone 15 available in the South Asian country at the unveiling later today. The entire event kicks off at Apple's Cupertino headquarters at 1 p.m. Wall Street time.
Well, also in the tech space, Nathan, the appetite for all things chips continues to grow, as we're seeing with the initial public offering of ARM Holdings. The IPO for ARM is oversubscribed 10 times, and sources say bankers plan to stop taking orders by this afternoon, but still plans to price its shares tomorrow. Bloomberg Markets editor Eddie Vanderwald says the decision to close books early suggests demand for the chip designer is strong.
I think that this is a real test case for investor demand, for broader tech, and for the AI story. And at the moment, looking just at how the IPO seems to be going off, it looks like it is, very strong still, despite rising interest rates.
And that's Bloomberg's Eddie Vanderwalt, who says ARM's stock offering is set to get underway later this week.
All right, sticking in the tech sector, but turning to Elon Musk, Karen. A new biography shows the world's richest man often ignored pleas to stop alienating advertisers. The new biography from Walter Isaacson states the billionaire owner of X, formerly Twitter, has a string of wealthy advisors he habitually ignores. One of those, Warner Brothers head David Zaslav, cautioned Musk about his self-destructive behaviors that were spooking advertisers, according to Isaacson's book. The news follows yesterday's pop in Tesla stock. It jumped 10% after Morgan Stanley said the company's Dojo supercomputer could boost Tesla's value by up to $500 billion. Checking shares of the Elon Musk-owned EV maker right now, they are down about 0.4%.
Meanwhile, Nathan, overseas this morning, shares of Chinese property giant Country Garden rallied after Reuters reported the distressed developer won approval from creditors to extend repayment on 6 yuan bonds by 3 years. Sources say the deadline for votes on 2 of 8 securities will be pushed back until later Tuesday. Country Garden has so far avoided defaulting, but recently warned it still could after posting a record first-half loss of almost $7 billion.
Also happening overseas this morning, Karen, Russian President Vladimir Putin prepares to meet with Kim Jong-un. The luxury armored train of the North Korean leader crossed into Russian territory earlier today. State media in North Korea and Russia say the two would meet, but no official schedule's been released. The meeting offers a chance for Putin to obtain weapons to fuel his war in Ukraine, and Kim a chance to win assistance for his beleaguered economy, as well as to expand his ability to deliver a nuclear strike.
Well, in the bank sector, Nathan, we're hearing scathing criticism of regulators from Jamie Dimon. The J.P. Morgan chairman and CEO took aim at higher capital requirements U.S. regulators proposed for the banking industry, saying he would love to know what they really want to accomplish.
The Federal Reserve should have a little humility. They're the ones that told the world rates aren't going up. And it wasn't the Federal Reserve in general. It was each one of them independently. In fact, it was each central bank. So if I were them, I'd have a little more humility over stuff like this.
JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon made the comments at the Barclays Global Financial Services Conference in New York. He's repeatedly called the proposal hugely disappointing.
And amid an uptick in COVID cases, Karen, we're getting closer to a new vaccination. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has that.
The FDA has approved the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines as there's a tick-up in late summer surge of the virus. Peter Marks of the FDA says the public can be assured that the update vaccines are safe. Now, it should be noted, these are not boosters. They're updated vaccines that protect against the new variants better. Approved for ages 12 and up, the CDC is supposed to meet today to possibly issue guidance. I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Time now to take a look at some of the other stories making news around the world. With that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Escaped Pennsylvania convict Danilo Cavalcante is still on the loose and now believed armed. It's been about 2 weeks after he was able to breach the police perimeter in Chester County. Authorities say Cavalcante managed to steal a van, alter his appearance, and drive nearly 20 miles north over the weekend. Deputy U.S. Marshal Robert Clark.
We expect to catch him as soon as possible, but we're not going to put all our ducks in a row and say, hey, we're going to have him by this Thursday. We're going to plan for a long investigation because we don't want to get caught planning for an immediate arrest and then we're not prepared later down the line.
Marshal Robert Clark says a homeowner shot at a subject recently that matched the description of Cavalcante. Lawyers for Donald Trump have asked the federal judge presiding over his election subversion case in Washington to recuse herself. They say Judge Tanya Chutkin's past public statements about the former president and his connection to the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol call into question whether she can be fair. It has been 22 years since nearly 3,000 people were killed during the September 11th attacks in New York at the memorial where the World Trade Center once stood. The names of the victims are read aloud and bells tolled, marking the moments that the hijacked airplanes hit the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, and a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. This girl honored the memory of her grandfather.
And my grandfather, Edward Joseph Papa. Grandpa Eddie, even though I never got to meet you, I feel like I've known you forever. From stories and videos and pictures, it's almost as if you're still here.
Mourners also offer thanks to the first responders. A new study suggests the dangers of lead exposure have been gravely underestimated. According to the World Bank, exposure to lead in 2019 may have caused 5.5 million deaths worldwide from cardiovascular disease and IQs in children under 5. Pure Earth President Richard Fuller worked with the World Bank on the study.
When they look at all of the different aspects of cardiovascular disease, lead poisoning is just as big globally as smoking or cholesterol.
Most of the effects were found in items like cookware made from recycled materials or lead-glazed pottery. The study is published in the Lancet Planetary Health Journal. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Thank you, Michael. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Thanks, Nathan. A night where Jets fans' emotions went from agony to ecstasy. The much-hyped Jets debut of Aaron Rodgers lasted all of 4 snaps. He threw 1 pass. He got sacked, hurt his leg. He left the game, and by all accounts, he's not coming back this season. A bitterly cruel blow after so much excitement surrounding Rodgers' arrival. It left the Jets once again with Zach Wilson, and he threw a bad first-half interception. But he played better second half, threw a touchdown pass. The Jets rallied from 10 down against the Bills. The game went to overtime.
Getting away, a line drive kick is Sam Martin. Gibson runs under it at the Jet 35. Starts to his left, gets to the 40, turns the corner at the 45-50. Blockers in front at the 40, at the Bills 30, inside the 20. Stutter steps to the 10, to the 5. Touchdown! And it's a Jet touchdown! This game is over!
ESPN New York to call with a Xavier Gibson 65-yard return. The Jets stunned the Bills 22-16. Tommy Pham, one of several Mets traded at the deadline, back at Citi Field with Arizona. He had a single-double, a game-tying home run. Diamondbacks scored in the ninth, topped the Mets 4-3. Yankees and Red Sox rained out in Boston, doubleheader today. Big series to help decide who gets the last wild card of the American League. Texas won 10-4 at Toronto. The Jays lead by a half game. The NBA will vote today on whether to start fining teams who rest their stars in national TV games. LeBron James hinted he wants to play in the Olympics next summer in Paris, calling it his last dance. And he is said to be recruiting Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. The U.S. just finished 4th at the World Cup. John Stashett with Bloomberg Sports.
From coast to coast, from New York to San Francisco, Boston to Washington, D.C., nationwide on SiriusXM, the Bloomberg Business app, and Bloomberg.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager, and we are counting down to Apple's latest product launch later today in Cupertino, California. The iPhone maker has been dealing with several negative headlines ahead of it, from China's crackdown on iPhones for government workers to delays for in-house chips. So, will a next-generation iPhone be enough to give Apple more of a lift as we head into the holiday quarter? Let's bring in Alex Webb, who covers the tech industry for us here on Bloomberg Radio. Well, Alex, we did get the headline moments ago that Made in India iPhones are going to be available on this launch day. That seems like it could be a big deal.
It's certainly an interesting narrative for them to be pushing, isn't it? There's been gradual pressure over time on the Chinese supply chain, of course, and Apple has been doing a huge amount to try to de-risk its exposure there. So they've been expanding the production capabilities in India. That also helps them in the Indian market, because if you want to have your own retail outlets there, you need to be manufacturing domestically. It is a market where they see a huge amount of potential. But let's put that in a bit of context, right? In the most recent data we have from March, trailing 12-month revenue was about $6 billion in India. In China right now, Apple has in the order of Greater China, which also includes Taiwan, has in the order of $74 billion in revenue. So India has a long way to catch up. The iPhones that are going to be on sale, made in India in the next generation, only a small portion of them will be coming from that market. The vast majority will still be made in China. So it is a change. It isn't a sea change just yet.
Do you expect it to be a sea change at some point, given some of the headwinds that Apple is facing in China right now?
It could well be, but that time is not a year away or 2 years away. It is 5 to 10 years away, right? It takes a long time to build up your supply chain. China has got not just the factories to make the iPhones, it has the factories that make the components that supply the iPhones. It has, the ability to mobilize millions of people to work in these factories at peak production season. That is not somewhere that India has got to yet. If you go to Shenzhen, you can see in that remarkable city, the how everything is there. Everything you need to make a smartphone pretty much is there, with the exception of the top of the line chips that the US is making it harder to import. So, Tim Cook has talked about India being at an inflection point. That's slightly empty language, because China was at $6 billion in revenue about 15 years ago, right? So after that point, it did massively accelerate. A lot needs to happen in India for it to get to that point.
Well, what does it tell you, Alex, that Apple is leaking out this kind of news about the supply chain and about the sourcing of next generation iPhones as the big thing for us to latch onto, as opposed to something along the lines of Vision Pro or details about what the next iPhone's going to have in it?
Well, I'm going to push back on that, Nathan, because I think you give our colleagues in India some credit for breaking this story. It's not necessarily a handout from the Apple PR machine. That there's probably a good deal of source reporting in there. Which
sure.
We don't know that this is something that Apple wanted to push. It is something that our colleagues have reported from their sources. So if they mention it, right, I think it's highly unlikely they will, because if they don't like to advertise on their devices that they are not necessarily made in the US, but if they were to mention it somehow in the course of the presentation, that would be remarkable. But that's not the messaging we have just yet.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, Alex, is are we expecting any more surprises from Apple in terms of what the components of the devices are going to be? What helps the iPhone 15 stand out from past iterations of this device? We got about a minute left.
Being frank, there's probably not a huge amount that's going to stand out from previous versions. The thing that's interesting is little stuff around the edges, and actually the edge is very much one thing, a thinner bezel at the edge of the phone, and also the Pro lineup is going to be made out of titanium, not out of steel. That should let them push a higher price point, and pricing is crucial right now. They're not selling as many units, or the pace of growth in unit sales has massively slowed. They're therefore trying to squeeze more money out of the units they do sell. New materials help them achieve that.
Do you think this product launch is going to be enough to give Apple a boost heading into the holiday quarter?
I mean, it'll certainly give it a boost, right? This is the biggest quarter for them every time. The question is it above and beyond expectations? You'll hear all sorts of back and forth. Oh, they're cutting production. But ultimately, the fact is, because the services business has been so good, people keep buying their new iPhones. And particularly if you're freshing at the high end, where there's less price sensitivity, that tends to support the growth trajectory.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, Sirius XM Channel 119, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.